You have been meaning to save more for a long time, not in a casual, vague, someday kind of way, in a real way. In the way where you have actually thought about it, actually done the math in your head, actually told yourself this month is going to be different. You have had the conversation with yourself more than once. After the next paycheck, after the holidays, after things slow down a little, after the car gets paid off, after the move, after the thing that always seems to be coming that would make saving feel more possible than it does right now, and then the paycheck comes, and the rent goes out, and the utilities clear, and the groceries happen, and the gas tank needs filling, and something unexpected arrives as it always does, a copay, a repair, a replacement for something that broke at the worst possible time. And by the time you get to the end of the pay period and look at what is left and think about transferring some of it to savings, there is not much left to transfer, maybe a little, maybe nothing. And the intention collapses quietly into next time, which sounds exactly like last time. This is not a discipline problem. It is not a character problem. It is not evidence that you are bad with money or that financial security is not actually available to someone like you. It is a sequencing problem, a structural problem. You have been trying to save what is left over after everything else, and the everything else has a way of expanding to consume exactly what is available to it. This is so consistent, so universal, so reliably true across income levels and demographics and life circumstances that it might as well be a law of financial physics. Leftover savings almost never accumulate into anything meaningful. Not because people do not want to save, because the structure they are using is designed to fail. Today, we are going to talk about the structure that is designed to succeed. It is one of the oldest principles in personal finance, simple enough to explain in a single sentence, and transformative enough that people who apply it consistently describe it as the single decision that changed their financial life more than any other. Pay yourself first, before the rent, before the bills, before the groceries and the gas and the obligations and the ordinary spending of an ordinary life, before any of it. The first transaction that happens when your paycheck lands is not a payment to your landlord or your utility company or your credit card issuer. It is a payment to you, to your future, to the version of yourself that is going to exist in 5 years and 10 years and 30 years and needs you to have made a decision today on their behalf. That payment goes into savings or into investments or into a retirement account depending on where you are in your financial journey, but it goes there first, before the rest of the money has a chance to become unavailable because life happened to it. This is not a new idea. It is not a trendy financial hack. It is the foundational principle behind nearly every serious wealth building story in American personal finance history. And yet most people are not doing it. Most people are doing the opposite, intending to save what is left, finding nothing left, and wondering why the savings account never grows. Today, you understand why. And today that changes. Let us start with the psychology, because understanding why this works helps you commit to it in a way that pure instruction cannot. Your brain is wired for the present. This is not a flaw. It is a survival mechanism that served human beings extraordinarily well for most of our history. When resources were uncertain and the future was genuinely unpredictable, prioritizing immediate needs over future ones was the rational choice. You ate the food now because there was no guarantee of food tomorrow. You used the resources available because holding them in reserve was a risk in a world where resources could be taken or lost. But you are living in a world where the opposite logic applies to financial resources. In your world, the resources you hold in reserve are protected. They earn returns, they compound. They become more valuable over time if you leave them alone. And the consequences of not holding resources in reserve are not immediate, but they are severe. And they arrive in the future with compounding interest of their own in the form of financial vulnerability, missed opportunities, and a retirement that requires working well past when you wanted to stop. Your brain does not feel that future consequence viscerally in the present moment. It feels the immediate satisfaction of having money available to spend. It feels the relief of not restricting. It normalizes to whatever baseline of spending is currently available and treats that baseline as necessary rather than chosen. When you pay yourself first, you change the baseline before the brain can normalize to the full amount. The money that goes into savings on payday never shows up in your checking account as available. Your brain never registers it as spendable. You adapt your spending to the amount that remains, which is slightly less than the full paycheck, and over time that adaptation becomes your normal. The money you move to savings is effectively invisible to the part of your brain that would otherwise find ways to spend it. This is not a trick. It is working with your psychology rather than against it. It is designing a structure that makes saving automatic and effortless rather than dependent on repeated acts of willpower in the face of competing immediate desires. Now, let us talk about what paying yourself first actually looks like in practice, because the principle is elegant and the implementation has a few important nuances worth understanding. The first question is how much should you pay yourself first? The answer depends on where you are in your financial journey, but the most important principle here is that starting with something is infinitely more valuable than waiting until you can start with the ideal amount. If you're just beginning, if you have no emergency fund and you're carrying high interest debt and the margin in your budget is genuinely thin, starting with $50 a pay period is meaningful. Not because $50 transforms your financial life immediately, because the habit of paying yourself first, established at $50, can grow, the automation gets set up, the behavior gets embedded, the psychological identity of someone who saves before they spend gets built, and when your income grows or your expenses decrease, the amount you're paying yourself first grows with it because the structure is already in place. A commonly cited target for savings is 20% of take-home income. This comes from a budgeting framework that allocates 50% to needs, 30% to wants, and 20% to savings and debt repayment. For many people at many income levels, 20% is a stretch. That is honest. If 20% feels impossible right now, it is not a reason to save nothing. It is a reason to start with 5% or 3% or whatever. You can actually automate without it immediately creating a crisis and to build from there. The second question is, where does the money go? And this depends on what job you need it to do. If you do not have an emergency fund, or if your emergency fund is below the threshold that would cover a genuine crisis, that is the first destination. The purpose of an emergency fund is to be the buffer between your financial plan and the random difficulty of life. Without it, the pay yourself first principle gets undermined every time something unexpected happens, because you end up pulling the savings back out to cover the crisis and never make net progress. Building the emergency fund first creates the foundation that makes everything else stable. A practical target for most people is somewhere between $1,000 as a first milestone and 3 to 6 months of essential living expenses as the fuller goal in a dedicated savings account. Not in your checking account where it can quietly become spending money. In a separate account, ideally at a different bank than your checking account, with just enough friction to make accessing it feel like a real decision rather than an impulse. Once the emergency fund is in place, the destination for your pay yourself first dollars shifts toward longer-term wealth building. For many people in the United States, this means retirement accounts. A Roth IRA or a traditional IRA, a 401k at work, especially if your employer offers matching contributions. The tax advantages of these accounts mean that the dollars you move into them are working harder than dollars kept in a regular savings account. And the earlier you begin, the more time compound growth has to do its work. Let us make compound growth concrete for a moment, because it is one of those concepts that is easy to nod at and hard to actually feel the weight of until you see it in numbers. You start paying yourself first at age 25. You move $200 a month into a Roth IRA and invest it in a broad market index fund. You do this every month without fail for 40 years. You never increase the amount, you never make any dramatic moves, you just maintain the habit for 4 decades. The total amount you contributed over those 40 years is $96,000, your own money. $200 a month for 40 years. But because the investments have been compounding over time, the balance at age 65 is dramatically larger than $96,000. The growth on top of growth on top of growth over 4 decades produces a result that feels almost implausible compared to the modest monthly amount that generated it. And because it is a Roth IRA, every dollar of that balance, every dollar of growth comes to you in retirement without any income tax owed. Now run the same scenario, but you wait until age 35 to start. Same $200 a month, same hypothetical return, 30 years instead of 40. The final balance is meaningfully smaller, not a little smaller, substantially smaller. The 10-year delay cost you something that cannot be recovered, because those first 10 years of contributions were not just 10 years of $200 deposits. They were 10 years of compounding that would have continued growing for the remaining 30 years. The money you did not invest at 25 did not just fail to earn a return for those 10 years. It failed to earn a return for all the years that would have followed. This is why the pay yourself first principle applied to long-term investing and applied early is so transformative over time. Not because of any dramatic action or sophisticated strategy, because of time and consistency applied to a simple automatic behavior. Now let us come back to your life and make this real. You get paid. The paycheck lands on Friday morning. Under the old structure, the money arrives in your checking account and joins everything else that is already there and becomes indistinguishable from the general pool of available funds. It gets spent over the course of the next 2 weeks on things that range from genuinely necessary to casually impulsive to completely forgotten. And when the next paycheck arrives, the account is thin and the savings account is unchanged, and the intention to do better next month lives on. Under the pay yourself first structure, something different happens the moment the paycheck lands. Before you open a food delivery app, before you check what is on sale, before you respond to any of the spending opportunities that present themselves on any given Friday. And automatic transfer, which you set up once and which now happens without requiring your involvement, moves your designated amount directly to savings or to your investment account or to your retirement account. It happens in the background. It happens before your brain has registered the full amount as available, and then you go about your day with what remains. The first month, this feels a little tight, maybe more than a little. You are living on slightly less than you are used to, and the edges feel noticeable, but you adapt faster than you expect. By the second month, the new baseline feels normal. By the third month, you have largely forgotten what it felt like to have that extra amount available for spending because your spending has adjusted to the new reality with the quiet efficiency of the human ability to normalize to whatever environment they find themselves in. And while your spending adapts down to the new baseline, your savings adapt up. The emergency fund grows, the investment account grows, the retirement balance grows. Slowly at first, in amounts that do not feel dramatic when you look at the numbers, but consistently. Month after month, without requiring heroic willpower or perfect financial behavior or the absence of life's complications. The structure does the work so you do not have to rely on motivation that fluctuates. Motivation is a feeling. Feelings change. They respond to stress and fatigue and distraction and the thousand small pressures of a real life. Automation does not have feelings. Automation is just a rule. The rule runs whether you're tired or distracted or having a difficult month or feeling financially defeated. The rule does not care about your mood. It just moves the money. This is the core genius of paying yourself first, implemented through automatic transfers. You have removed the decision from the moments when you are least equipped to make it well. You made the decision once when you were clear and intentional, and now the decision makes itself every pay period without your participation. There is something else that happens when you pay yourself first consistently over time that goes beyond the mechanics of the savings account or the investment balance. It changes your relationship with money in a way that is hard to predict before you have experienced it. When you have been saving by paying yourself first for 6 months, for a year, for 2 years, you develop a kind of financial confidence that is different from anything income alone produces. It is not the confidence of having a lot of money. It is the confidence of knowing that your financial life has a direction, that something is building, that the work you did last month did not evaporate into nothing, that the version of yourself in 5 years is going to be in a meaningfully better position than you are today, not because of luck or a windfall, but because of a decision you made and a structure you built and maintained. That confidence affects more than your finances. It affects the way you make decisions at work. Because you are not operating purely from financial desperation. It affects the risks you are willing to take because you have a cushion that makes risk less catastrophic. It affects the way you feel on Sunday night because the financial anxiety that used to occupy that quiet space has somewhere to go now. You have a plan. The plan is working. The account has more in it than it did last month. That is enough to quiet the part of your mind that used to spin on uncertainty. People who have built this habit and maintained it for years describe a particular experience that almost all of them mention independently. They describe a moment, usually somewhere in the first year, when they checked their savings account or their investment account and saw a number that surprised them, not a number that made them rich. A number that was simply more than they expected given how painlessly the saving had happened. A number that made them think, this is actually working. I did not even feel it, and it is actually working. That moment is the pay yourself first principle paying its most important dividend, not the dollars in the account, though those matter enormously. The proof that you are capable of this. The evidence that the system works for you the way it has worked for others. The lived experience of saving without suffering, of building without grinding, of making genuine financial progress as a background process of your life rather than a constant, exhausting foreground effort. You have been meaning to save more for a long time. You have had the intention, you have had the desire. What you have not had until now is the structure that makes the intention irrelevant. Because when the structure works, you do not need the intention in the moment. The moment has already been handled. The decision has already been made. The transfer has already gone through. The only thing left is the first decision. The one you make once, clearly and deliberately, about how much to move and where to move it and when to set up the automatic transfer. One decision executed once that then runs on autopilot for as long as you let it, building the emergency fund that protects your plan, building the investment account that grows your future, building the retirement balance that purchases your freedom from mandatory work in the years when freedom will matter most. Your future self is not going to remember the specific things you spent money on in the next 12 months. They will not remember the dinners or the impulse purchases or the subscriptions or the small conveniences that the unassigned dollars went to. But they will absolutely feel the difference between a future that was prepared for and a future that was arrived at without preparation. Pay yourself first. Not next month, not after the next thing settles down. On the very next payday, with whatever amount is honest and sustainable right now. Set the transfer up, make it automatic, and then let time and consistency do the rest. You were always capable of this. You just needed the structure that makes capable feel like enough. If this is landing the way it needs to, if something in this conversation gave you the missing piece that turns intention into action, then stay here. Subscribe to Dollar First and keep coming back, because this is what we do. We build the structures that make your financial life work even on the days when you are too busy living it to think about it. And there is so much more to build together.